While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast. Cellular health. You've heard me mention it countless times on the show. I've been talking about it for years. Now, more and more people are becoming aware of it. I brought in an expert nutritionist and functional medicine / wellness guru, Mr. Doug Grant. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your journey, because I know you're one of the first, or if not the first, nutritionist in the NBA. How were you accepted, and how did you go about kind of winning them over?
That's a great question. And yeah, I was had the great distinction of being the first nutritionist ever hired in the NBA by a team full time. And that is great, but it did come with some challenges. I remember day one, the first hour of day one of my dream job, right? I come from a small town and, get excited, hired by the Phoenix Suns and go down and the owner loved me, would help him reduce his cholesterol, get his health under control. And two or three of the athletes, Danny Ainge, Charles Barkley, a couple that people might know a few names of the old timers. But anyway, so we already had, a really good in. I thought it was just a done deal, and come to find out that the way teams run is they have a complete medical board. You have the chief surgeon, you have the team doctor, you've got the chiropractor, you've got the trainers, you've got the strength coaches, you've got nutritionists, and everyone has to work together, and everyone works under whoever was deemed the captain, just like a team. And our captain was a surgeon. And he came up to me and said, "Hey, I know the owner likes you, and you supposedly got some good results with, diet and exercise and blood work and supplements with some of the players, but I don't believe in that stuff. I don't think nutrition really plays a role, in performance," and on and on. And so just kind of hang over to the side. And so it was actually one of those defining moments, Dr. Jackson, we all have those where it's like, what do we do in that moment, really defines the future. And so instead of cowering, I said, you know what, you're absolutely right. Most nutrition is junk because it's processed. Most supplements are synthetic. So they just get expensive urine. And I agreed with him, but I said, what makes this difference is obeying the laws of nature and respecting nature, just finding out based on data. And since we're data driven, let's just do some blood work on some of the athletes, see if they improve. If not, I'll quit. And he was all on board. And luckily enough, we had a couple athletes that were really bad shape with their diet and lifestyle that they were able to have dramatic improvements, get 12, 13 more points a game, improve their overall scores as far as cholesterol and heart disease rate and that. And that doctor actually became my best referral. He's one that got me into the Miami Heat and the Spurs and the rest of them. So yeah, it was quite a journey, but it was a good one because, when you base things off of nature and obeying nature's laws, they never change, and you're in a good place. And so luckily I was in that place.
Absolutely. It's interesting to me that when we test athletes for steroids, we test them via urine samples, and if that shows up in the urine, then we say it's positive that they used the steroid. But with supplements, if it shows up in the urine, it says, oh well, it didn't work. It seems it's like those two ideas can't coexist. But what are some of the ways that you immediately help athletes? Were you using mostly blood work assessments, or was stool testing prominent then, or what type of testing were you using?
Yeah, we use a gold standard of blood, and then depending on what comes up with the blood, we determine other testing. But I always stuck with the universal language because, like when, gosh, we had a couple players from China, come in, and Yao and a few of them, we had to communicate with other countries and their doctors, and the one universal language was blood. So I always do blood work, have been doing that for 30 years. We got thousands of doctors around the nation that we've taught in blood work. We spend most of our time now training doctors on holistic principles, blood work, nutrition, supplementation, and how they can really specialize and customize people's nutrition plans and supplement plans based on, data. And I love the data from the blood, but other health professionals will use other means of getting data. But that's really the key. Like, you want to take the guesswork out when it comes to your health. And I love to do the blood work as a starter. And for some people, it's all they need, right? Like, hey, it's pretty obvious, simple deficiencies here and there, or certain things in their diet they need to improve. They probably already knew, and we'll work on those. But I recommend everyone in the world to get blood work done twice a year. We've been able to catch diseases and conditions and things so far ahead of time that they wouldn't have caught if they weren't doing blood work twice a year, that, just saved lives. And although most people that come to me are wanting just to improve performance, whether it's CEOs, couples, athletes, whatever it might be, the fact is if you get data, a lot of times you can see that the body's heading a direction it shouldn't go, and you can catch it ahead of time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I tell people all the time, I mean, you got to look underneath the hood at least twice a year. And you would probably both know individuals with six-pack abs who've dropped dead of a heart attack or stroke or another, fatal event.
Yeah, that's what
And
I,
yeah,
I had nowadays, me and my wife Hillary, she's a professional natural bodybuilder. We do concierge health coaching, and most of our people are obviously, high-end CEOs and their spouse, and or the athletes. A lot of them retired athletes, need to get their health back. But anyways, about 2 weeks ago, a really, really high level, well-known fitness influencer from social media called, said he wasn't feeling good and wanted to, see if we could help him, and did the blood work, and come to find out that, extremely high risk for heart attack, not just heart disease, extremely high risk, full type 2 or diabetes, full out, and a lot of these markers. And yet he did have a six-pack. He did look great, like you're saying. But internally, it was really obvious that he had been taking some things into his body they shouldn't have been ever, performance enhancing drugs, different things like that they make maybe look good on the outside, but internally they're just being destroyed. So that's a really good point. I mean, we try to tell people you should work to look as good as possible in your body. You want to get it to aesthetically to, work well, and it works well when it's at its right body fat, when your ratio of muscle is at its best. But that's secondary to the cellular level health, and how fit it is.
yeah, absolutely. And I think people a lot of times, focus on the aesthetics part at the expense of their health. But I try to tell clients and patients that if you pursue optimal health, the body composition will come as a secondary benefit. But if you just chase body composition, I mean, you can take a bunch of stimulants and, likely get shredded. You might have a heart attack and stroke. By the way, I had a patient when I worked at Health South who 29, very fit, muscular police officer. He drank 2 Monster energy drinks within like a 4-hour period. And he went to bed and he wasn't feeling well, but he thought he was tired from his 12-hour shift. He woke up and he had hemiparesis on the entire right side of his body.
Yeah,
So
that's very, very interesting, situation there. But you hear a lot of that. I think that's really the point, whether it be heavy duty processed foods over time and or immediate, the Red Bulls causing kidney stones, just the sodas with the high caffeine content. Yeah, it's just crazy. And you're right. When a lot of people will come and say, I want to lose weight, especially right now, right, coming into the new year. And I tell them the same thing. I'm like, awesome. You know what? If we get your cells healthy and your metabolism up like it needs to be, so it's just humming, the side effect is you're going to lose body fat. If you do what I ask you to in the gym, the side effect is you're going to look phenomenal, but yet you're going to have your brain chemicals are going to work better. You're going to get better release of serotonin and dopamine. You're going to, just feel better, but the side effect is you're going to look great.
Absolutely. And can you give us some examples of, for example, on blood work, if you see the mean corpuscular volume is 93 or higher, we know that typically implicates that you're not methylating very well. And listeners will likely know the methylation pathway, the over 200 reactions. It's how we detoxify. It's how we make helper T cells and killer T cells. Can you give us some other examples of imbalances you see on basic blood work?
Absolutely. I think that the ones that are most common that people would be familiar with, but it's really in the last 3 years, really came about in a large way because we've been, doing thousands of blood work, blood labs every year now, for 30 years. But these last 3 years, we've seen this extreme deficiency in vitamin D that we've never seen before. And is low vitamin D causing depression? A lot of doctors are diagnosing clinical depression from low vitamin D and talking to a patient, but that low vitamin D is a marker for that. And it's critical to help fight off viruses. I think that's the thing, is to get used up when you get a virus. So if you didn't get sick, but you knew you were around it, a good chance your vitamin D and a few other levels were there and fought it, but now you're going to be deficient. So vitamin D is a big one that we're noticing. People like, I'm having a hard time staying focused and caring, and just a vitamin D deficiency. And that's a huge one that we're seeing now. And very few patients or clients I see that they come in that their vitamin D levels are where they belong. We like to have them up around 80 or 100. I know that the government says, hey, around 50 or so, you're fine. But the new research, and especially out of Europe, we go higher with that. And we live in Arizona, so it's not a sun thing. It's an internal mechanism of developing vitamin D in the body. You need to consume it. And the other thing that's really been big, I think, for us in the last while is something called C-reactive protein. And C-reactive protein, for the listeners, is really the simple version is a overall look at inflammation throughout the whole body. We call it systemic inflammation. And if that number is high, we know something's going on, and you might not be feeling it, but we know that systemic inflammation, if you have inflammatory markers throughout the body, that it makes you ripe for disease. We did a long-term study in the MBA with people that had knee surgery, and come to find out that the highest incidence of heart disease in the MBA before and after they retire has to do with people that had knee surgery. And what's that connection? And the connection is inflammation, that they never got rid of the scar tissue, and there was constant, small grade inflammation in the body, but that inflammation over time caused issues with the heart, creating heart disease. So we really take a look at that, and that's something that maybe is a little bit unique for the listeners. Because everyone talks about your cholesterols and your LDLs and all that stuff. That's important, and your hemoglobin A1C and blood sugar, but that's kind of a unique marker that we really pay close attention to.
Yeah, I'm curious with the vitamin D, are you checking both 25 hydroxy and 1,25 hydroxy? Because I know in patients with neuroimmune syndromes, a lot of times they hyperconvert the 25 hydroxy into the 125. So if you just check the 25, it appears low. And then you have traditional allopathic doctors giving like 50,000 IUs, and then these mega doses, which without the cofactors like K2 and magnesium, et cetera, you could create kidney stones. And I know because I got one.
Wow. Yeah, we do check both, but even on a basic panel where we're just doing the basic vitamin D test, one thing that's interesting is there's a hospital here near where our manufacturing plant, our offices are here in Arizona, and the head of the hospital came over about a year ago, the director and medical doctor, and said, hey, I got patients and I put 50,000 IUs vitamin D, on the prescription to them, and they're coming back and their levels aren't going up, and they come to you and get on like 5,000 max and their levels are going out the roof. And I'm like, yes, because ours is mushroom based. It's not synthetic from cholecalciferol from lamb's wool. And we're combining it with the right cofactors, your K2, magnesium, and those. And the fact that it's even a mushroom based is going to have those with it anyways. And it was a real eye opener for him. It's like, you can't tell me, like he said, you couldn't have told me there was a difference if I didn't see it. And so he's actually now been very interested and got him turned on to giving patients probiotics when he recommends antibiotics now, and really making a good paradigm shift. But you have a really good point. I think that's the thing that is important for people to understand. You need to get blood work done to know your risk of disease, to know what your cell's doing. But the key really is then being able to improve the diet and take in the right whole food supplements that truly enact change. The reason most supplement companies don't like or talk about blood work is because they don't want you to find out their product doesn't work. And we're the opposite. We're like, hey, let's prove that whole food vitamins are what the body wants, not synthetic. And let's make sure that the blood can change and that it can improve at that cell level. And if you don't mind, one thing we teach people, and I think it'd be good for the audience to know, is the reason we focus on the cells, and myself, Dr. Jackson, a lot of other doctors that are truly holistic around the nation. The reason we focus on the cells is because the red blood cells, the erythrocytes, you have trillions of them, but each of them is a microcosm of the whole body. Just like you breathe, so does the cell. We take in nutrients, so does the cell. We excrete waste, so does the cell. We could live up to be 120 years if we did things right. The cell lives up to 120 days. Everything's a microcosm of the whole. So if we treat the cell in a way to make it have optimal health and it's functioning great, the whole body will function with optimal health and feel great. And that's why we really zero in on that. That way you can actually get rid of fads and things. You're like, hey, I went on this fad diet or product. Awesome. Do your blood work, see if it worked. I don't even argue with people anymore. I'm like, the blood doesn't lie.
Absolutely. Let's unpack something you touched on. I know your company, Optimal Health Systems, which you got the nice sign back there, with vitamins. So let's say whole food vitamins versus something like thiamine. So I'm sure you know this, but for listeners, there's a specific form of thiamine called TTFD. I won't give you the long chemical name, but basically it helps to cross the blood-brain barrier more easily. And for some people who have polymorphisms where they can't get the B1 into the cell, TTFD can work pretty well. But would you say that all synthetic vitamins are harmful? Or is it a situation where, I know you're not a fan of TRT, but for the sake of argument, bioidentical hormones, people think that they're naturally occurring, but all it means is that the receptors can recognize the substance and bind to the receptor.
Absolutely. And yeah, two hot things there. One is I believe all synthetic vitamins are unhealthy as a general rule, because some people's bodies are able to take that synthetic vitamin and be able to convert it and be using it. But we have to assume that happens. When you deal with a whole food vitamin, you don't have to worry about it. It's methylated. It comes in the forms that it's supposed to be from nature. There's things in it that we don't even know about. I mean, we're discovering new phytonutrients every month still. So, this whole thing about we know everything, we don't. And so respecting nature is important. Like, in other words, using just the whole food because of those cofactors that are there. And, a real simple explanation of that is ascorbic acid. People feel ascorbic acid is natural. The government now lists ascorbic acid as vitamin C. Ascorbic acid is not vitamin C. It's a part of vitamin C. But the way ascorbic acid is made is through a 13-step process, but two of the ingredients is hydrochloric acid and corn syrup. And so you're mixing these ingredients and chemicals together to come up with a molecule that has the shape of a vitamin C, but really it's an empty shell. It's like a dead body, if you would. It can't do anything. It can't function. In fact, it's going to take work to get rid of it. But when you get a vitamin C from an orange, an acerola cherry, amla, something like that, then you're getting the full spectrum. You're getting the ascorbic acid, the bioflavonoids, the rutin, the J and K factor. You're getting the whole thing. And you're getting things that we don't even know of. The J and K factor are things that are unknowns. And they're just present. We know because of weight that they're there. And so the respecting of nature is critical for the body. And so if I give you a whole food vitamin C, we know that it's going to get in the system, it's going to do its job, help with the immunity, everything that it does, collagen and all that. But if I give you ascorbic acid, your body's got to find a way to convert that into an organic dextrorotatory spinning molecule. And sometimes it can do it, sometimes it can't, and sometimes it turns toxic. So I think that that's really the key. The best thing to do is when you look at vitamins, it should have a name of a food next to it that it was derived from, and it names a food. And if it doesn't, then you have a pretty good chance that it's synthetic.
So when people come to you, whether it's a CEO or weekend warrior or retired pro athlete or active pro athlete, do you typically start with assessing their lifestyle, their circadian rhythm? Are they getting morning sunlight? Are they exposed to a lot of non-native EMFs, things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing is the intake. And because most of our clients around the nation, we don't do like the brick and mortar clinics that most health professionals do, that, we'll do a Zoom call and we do real heavy discussion about their environment. His environment is key, as you're alluding to. In fact, this shirt is an EMF protected shirt. And because I travel a lot. And at one time I started traveling around with my little EMF meter and going through the airports and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is bad. And, I think it's important that, 20 years ago, we would be affected with electromagnetic fields, with phthalates in the water, with microplastics at an extreme small level. And our body, as long as we were doing things right, because we have a liver, because we have kidneys, is no issue. Now we have an accumulation effect. We can't go anywhere. We can't drink any water, eat any food unless we're growing it type of thing. It's not going to have some chemicals in it. We're getting hit with radiation every time we drive by, any cell tower at the offices, the microwaves, the homes, your computers, this setup I have here. And so we now are getting this accumulation of these electromagnetic radiation and these chemicals in the food that is affecting us because it's building up so much. Something that we didn't used to have to really worry about if we lived a healthy lifestyle. Now we do. So we need to, on the daily, do some things that we wouldn't normally do in the past, just to help us to not accumulate as many of these toxins. So when I know I'm going to be around a lot of computers, a lot of EMF type stuff, I'll wear, my shirts that have that. It's called an OG Shield shirt. And then we'll do the nutrition, the supplements. I take a lot higher phytonutrients than most people because they're our line of defense, glutathione, master antioxidant, all these things to be able to neutralize or block these microplastics and phthalates and EMFs that come in. So it's not that me and you would look at people a long time ago like, yeah, they're a little bit out there, type thing. Now it's like, we absolutely need to. And the people that don't, they're getting this accumulation and they're wondering why they're not feeling good, why they're getting sick, why their testosterone levels are tanking, why their estrogen levels are going off the chart. Women are hitting menopause too soon. And it's mainly because of this accumulation of all of these things. So you need to, have a plan to do the best you can to neutralize them, block them in your daily life. And your blood will show a lot of that.
And this has to factor into your exercise recommendations as well. I know I tell people, okay, the higher your allostatic load, your internal stressors plus your external stressors, we're going to go down in the number of sets, but not in the weight. That way we're creating the same metabolic stimulus, but the volume on your endocrine system, the taxing on your endocrine system is not as great. You kind of see it the same way?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the big things in the assessment. A lot of people come, I want to get more muscle and do all this. I'm like, okay, we need to look at your daily lifestyle, your environment. Do you own your own business? What role do you play in it? What are your stress levels? And take a look at it. And then from that, we'll design the workout program exactly to that, the sets, the reps, the weight. And it really is important that we put enough stress on the system to where it becomes stronger, but not so much that it takes a dive because it is over, or not too little that it doesn't do much for them. But exercise is probably the greatest medicine not focused on in the world. People think, the people go to the gym just to build their bodies and do that. Man, we have people exercise that could care less what their bodies look or even really how it performs. They do it for the mental health. A lot of these top CEOs, that's one of the things that they're like, we want to keep doing your program forever. And I'm like, really, the biggest thing we did is make you exercise when you didn't feel like it, to be able to, the clear the receptors, be able to get endorphins going at the right rate, to be able to get the mind, and all of a sudden now they're more focused. So you're absolutely right. And we use an acronym, Dr. Jackson, to make sure we stay holistic, because it's really easy for us in our world to go down these rabbit holes, right? All I'm going to focus on is mitochondria. All I'm going to focus on is methylation. All I'm going to focus on is diet, when really we've got to stay holistic. And so we use the acronym of fitness. The FIT is focused, intense thought. That's when we get in the mindset. Do we need nootropics involved? Are they on Adderall? We need to get them off Adderall immediately. We need to get them on things to be able to help them focus. What are they doing for meditation? That type of stuff. So the focused, intense thought is the FIT. The N is nutrition, getting rid of synthetics, getting rid of processed foods, getting the balanced diet, looking at the blood, letting the blood tell us, genetically maybe where they're at and what they digest well and what they don't. And then the E of fitness is exercise. We've mentioned dialing it in properly, getting enough of the cardio, getting enough of the strength training to really make it so they have more hours of the day, not taken away. Well, I don't have enough time. That scenario. And then S and S of fitness stands for specific supplementation, not just hitting it with a shotgun, but doing the tests, no matter what tests you're doing some tests to get data to then design the supplement program based on that, so that you can track performance and track improvement. And the fitness acronym keeps us holistic. So every patient, every client gets something in each area of that acronym in order to keep balanced in life. And I think that's one of the problems, is this going down one way, right? They're just stuck on intermittent fasting. They're just stuck on this vitamin. They're just stuck on this, and they're not being holistic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I see clinicians and I know colleagues that, everything's mold, everything's heavy metals, everything's gut dysbiosis. I'm like, it's all important. It's just a matter of how important are those variables to this particular individual. I mean,
Absolutely.
I have a saying, everything causes everything, because ultimately it does, either directly or indirectly. And so, if we have 10 people, they might all have the same symptoms, but, one person might have major gut dysbiosis, minor blood sugar dysregulation, and some heavy metals. The next person may not have any of those things.
Yeah. The thing is it's so easy. Like you said, we train doctors, we'll have them come to a seminar, and it seems like every year they'll keep saying, certain clinics will keep saying, well, yeah, but how's the gut play in that? Like, we got to focus on it first. And I think from a marketing standpoint, there's nothing wrong with leading with something to get people's interest. I lead with digestion, like, hey, what's the most important thing you can do in the world? Digest your food. Now that we're going to start focusing on what foods you eat and everything else that goes with it. But if I had to do one thing, I'll be like, you've got to digest your food, eat more raw food, period. And if you don't, add back enzymes. And so I think it's fine to lead with what it is you're most passionate about, to be able to talk about one subject. But you're right. But the second you speak to that patient, and for everyone listening, you need to make sure you're with a doctor that asks you those questions, about your lifestyle, your environment, and then can really dial in that full program. That's really the key. And the best doctors, holistic doctors, do that. The ones that want to get just, like, hey, I don't want to worry about anything else. I'm going to focus on my specialty. They get mad at me, but I tell them, you guys think you're holistic, but you're not. Holistic means you're looking at the whole body. You have many ways to help treat the body and all the areas that are important to the cell. That's holistic. Just because you don't prescribe drugs does not make you holistic.
Yeah, the ebook on my website is called Beyond Green Allopathy. Need to change the title because I realize maybe myself and 2 other people know what green allopathy means. But, if a patient comes to me and they're like, hey, I'm on 14 supplements or 14 medications, I'm like, okay, I got you. We're going to put you on 14 supplements. I mean, granted, there's less side effects, but are you getting to the root cause? Most likely not. I try to tell people in the long term, maybe 4 to 5 supplements, depending on their stress level. And we can pulse, if we need to save money, once you optimize your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, then you can take them 3 to 4 days a week if you can't afford to take them every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that comes back to the data thing, and with the patients. And usually if they're on multiple prescriptions, we're going to see the side effects right away on it. And like the guy I just talked to you about the other day, like, you got to be on prescriptions. Your blood couldn't look this bad. Like, you just, after a while, it, right? Like, you're either an alcoholic or you take Tylenol. Tell me which one.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. And I think to your point with liver enzymes, ALT, AST, people forget that those are measuring physical damage to the liver. You can still have an imbalance in phase 1, phase 2 liver detox pathways, and it may not show up on blood. But if it does show up and those numbers, ALT and AST, are elevated, then you definitely have a liver issue.
absolutely. And that's why the blood's so cool, because, one of the things we like to tell the patients too is the body will do everything in its power to keep the blood perfect. It will suck calcium out of the bones. It will do everything. And so if it's off in the blood, we got an issue. We got an issue and we need to address it. It's not like it's just in the urine. A lot of times you get all kinds of stuff. The body's just, it's its job to get rid of the waste, but in the blood, it's going to maintain it, right? The pH goes up over 0.1, either way you die. So it's going to maintain, the consistency as much as possible.
One thing I've gotten, I was into many years ago, and I've gotten back into the past 3 or 4 years, are electrolytes. They're not sexy like hormones or gut health or mitochondria. People think, oh, well, they're just kind of like an additional, like icing on the cake type thing. But I think they're crucial, and our bodies think they're crucial, right? They keep them in a very narrow range. When, you look at electrolytes like magnesium on blood work, that's only 1% of your body's magnesium. But if it's low, then that's definitely problematic. And I'll give you an anecdotal story. In 2019, I was drinking a lot of molecular hydrogen water. And I live in the southeastern US, and I was walking about an hour a day. And then 4 days a week, I was lifting weights. I went to take a bath one day, and I never take my cell phone with me. I'm just one of those people, half the time I don't know where my phone is. But that day, I can only chalk it up to God, source, whatever you want to call it. I had my phone with me. I lost the ability to lift my upper extremities.
What?
Yeah. And so I called 911, called my parents. I had a potassium of 2.2. I had to excrete it out because I was sweating, in the sauna. I was sweating outside working out. I wasn't replacing my electrolytes, especially potassium. And so they were about to do a spinal tap, and they gave me some IV potassium and then some PO oral potassium. And then I started to gradually gain back strength. They kept me overnight. So what's your take on electrolytes, and have you seen extreme cases like that?
Yeah, luckily having, my initial background in professional sports, in the early 90s, we became very aware how critical that was. And so much so that the first place we would go when we see performance issues on the court, hydration, electrolytes, hydration, electrolytes, hydration, electrolytes. And for some reason, you're right, it kind of fell away, that it got, all these things that popped up that was more sexy. And it got to be a fad again, thankfully, lately through, social media and TikTok and the fasting and that, which is critical. It tells you, like, if you're fasting, electrolytes are your best friend. There's a reason, and they should be your best friend outside of fasting too. And it's a big factor. I think one of the things I like to tell people is like, look, too little potassium, you die. Too much potassium, die. In fact, if we wanted to kill you, and you're going to go and we're going to get lethal injection, it's potassium. So the ratio is critical to the health of the body. And so we really focus in on that with the blood work too, is, where are you at with those numbers, and sodium, your potassium, your chloride numbers. So overall, what is the view of those? So absolutely 100%. I'm a big fan. I agree with. In fact, I'm one of those that many times recommends more sodium than most people would think, just because a lot of these high stress, high activity people go through it, they burn it too much. And so they need to take in a lot more than someone that's more sedentary in life. But the diet's a huge factor with that, right? I mean, we're talking your cantaloupes and your bananas and a lot of these potassium rich foods that a lot of people don't eat a lot of, and the cruciferous vegetables and those types of things. And so if people aren't having at least one, if not two large salads a day, I already know that they're going to be extremely deficient and probably have electrolyte issues.
Absolutely. Speaking of electrolytes, let's talk about your time in professional sports and Gatorade. Oh, Dr. Tim, I got to replenish my glycogen stores. I hear that, 4 times a day, probably many days. What's your take? Because I read, I don't remember the guy's name, but he tested the original Gatorade formula back in the day, and he said it tasted nothing like the present day Gatorade.
Yeah, the original Gatorade formula, it came out before me, but it was still new and working with the Miami Heat. It came out of Florida, and right, obviously it was where it was created. And the original formula did not have the glucose polymers in it and the heavy sugars that they do now, let alone the sucralose and the other additives and the dyes that they ended up putting in them. I know they've tried to recently come out with one that's a stevia base. But the bottom line is, if you take a look at the amount of glucose that is used up during exercise and the need to replenish it at that level, there's very few people that need to do that. And actually, they did a study and proved that you can actually do it better, safer, and more healthy by just consuming some raisins during like long-term running events, sporting events, things like that. So they kind of debunked the whole thing about all the gels and Gatorades and that, although they're still extremely popular. But now it's just a marketing game. So I'm to answer the question, I'm not a fan of those. They taste great, but I'm not a fan of those as far as health is concerned. And I believe that very few people need them. And with the teams, what would happen every year is the team would get paid millions of dollars to advertise different things. And back in the 96 season, we had a situation happen with one of the teams. I guess I can't mention the name, but we had a team that I worked with, and the Gatorade had assumed that they had won the contract, but their contract was that that's what the players would drink. And what happened is Powerade come in and won the contract for the actual containers. So they actually had these big containers of Powerade with Gatorade in them because of who paid the most to be there, not what was best for the athlete. And we actually made up an electrolyte drink that I mixed up and made up for them that actually we had them take beforehand, halftime, anytime there wasn't a camera on them. And so, the marketing is nuts. And I think that people need to realize that the reality is, those of us that work with professional athletes for decades, majority of what you see and they promote isn't what they do behind the scenes to really have optimal performance. They do blood work. They take in whole food nutrition, right? We sometimes we can't keep them away from alcohol, but we try to limit alcohol. But then we do heavy duty liver cleansing and doing all kinds of things to be able to keep the body up to speed for that lifestyle. And you just don't see that usually in the media.
Right. I know Tom Brady, I remember him saying that I think inside of his Gatorade container that he had a greens drink, like a greens powder that he would drink. And so, the stuff we looked at him, or I didn't look at him, but, the media, the way they described him was like, oh, he's working with this quack. I'm like, that quack probably knows more than every other doctor combined. But I mean, the proof's in the pudding, right? I mean, look at his longevity, his mobility.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so true. And, Guerrero, who he works with at our focus intense thought thing, is the lead doctor that Brady works with, on the mindset part of it and what he would do, on traveling and that, that the other players didn't. He was focused in at what worked the best. And the players that do that, they're the ones that have longevity. They're the ones that, become legendary. And you see that difference because they put that extra effort in it. Down that way in Florida, Dwayne Wade worked with him from his rookie year all the way through, and he had that longevity with that. David Robinson, a lot of these different people that they didn't care what people thought. They were going to do what's best for them no matter what, and it showed on the court, on the field. And that we should be the same way as non-professional athletes. It shows in our daily work ethic, being able to go home and still have energy for the spouse and the kids. And one of my favorite sayings that said for years is that the healthier your presence, the more you can be present. And people say, well, why do I need to care about my health? Well, you can't. Time is the one thing that's going to go no matter what. You want to be able to enjoy time. You want to be present. And there's a lot of times we're not present because we're not feeling good, or our brain, we have fog and cognitive function isn't there. And so the healthier your presence, yes, your body fat, yes, your weight, but more importantly, the cell level, that presence then the more you can be present in life and really enjoy those moments. We're coming up on, tomorrow's Thanksgiving for us, and I want to be present to enjoy the chaos or whatever, as soon as at the holiday season. And it's one of the reasons that we, non-professional athletes, should focus on our health, just so that we can be more present, that we can enjoy life at the highest level, and those moments that we'll never get back.
Yeah, I have a colleague, Dr. Medea Saeed in Chicago, and her kids, she has 4 sons, 4 or 5, I think 4. Her youngest 3 sons have a show called the Holistic Kids Show. And I was super impressed. I mean, you got, think of 6, 8, and 10-year-old interviewing me. I mean, ask me about mitochondria and electrolytes. I'm like, you guys are so far ahead of the game. But she has 3 generations living under the same roof. And so I asked her, is it stressful? She said, no, Dr. Tim, it's actually not, because we've all optimized our health. And so everyone's present, everyone gets along.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. A great example too of that, because it's really kind of the whole focus is that, we want to, lead this life with a young, healthy body at an old age, right? We want to be able to be present and enjoy it. And that's having 3 generations there. That's super awesome.
Yeah. And to go back to the NBA examples, I remember, I think it was like 5 years ago, that several of the Los Angeles Lakers were on a paleo nutrition template. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah. The Lakers are their own island. So in the NBA, all the years I was there, you work and share information, all the teams except for the Lakers. The Lakers like to be their own little world, and they'll go off and do different things, thinking they're being ahead of the game and that. And we actually have a lot of players that have done what's now called the caveman diet, or done then the Atkins high protein, just different names are recycled. And they, I feel better, I'm doing great, I'm making it, and I'm doing keto, I'm going to kill everyone because I'm feeling so much better. And I'm like, okay, but let's watch the data. And the data consistently would show down, 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 but yet mentally in their head they're thinking they're doing great because they felt different. And so we've learned for decades that there is a diet that if you follow it, you reach your highest level of performance. The same holds true with marathon runners, basketball players, daily life, and it's a balance of whole foods. And people, there's all kinds of arguments out there, but the fact of the matter is, the healthiest people ever to live on the planet in the blue zones, the true research on the blue zones, the top athletes in the world in quick sports or marathon type sports, and that all follow the plan of the healthy carbohydrates. Least processed, if they do grains, least processed grains possible, berries, fruits, vegetables, lean meats. And they followed that model, and they are able to reach optimal performance and stay with that the longest. And that it's crazy that people keep trying to fight that formula when the data we have is so strong, from every sport for decades, for hundreds of years with people. And I think there are some exceptions. Me and you will use specific diets in certain situations, certain cancerous situations and things, but we're using it as a medicine at the moment, almost like a drug to affect a change, right? But in the lifestyle and longevity, these teams, people, groups that will go off and go on these, tangents like that, they end up paying the price. And, they didn't win the world championship last year for a reason. That year.
And some of the people with the most imbalanced gut microbiomes I see have been on keto for 3-4 years. And I don't think it was intended to be used in that manner. I mean, for people with neurodegenerative disorders, epilepsy, things like that, sure, go all in. But outside of that, you have to work on your metabolic flexibility, right?
Absolutely. And that's really the key. I think the metabolic flexibility is a factor, focusing on the mitochondria, and then using other nutrition protocols, leave that in the hands of the health professional to do for short durations to enact a change. Even in the bodybuilding world, what we do with, like, my wife before Olympia and she gets on stage and that is not normal. but we're enacting a change. We're using protein as a diuretic. We use carbohydrates, to get the muscles a little fuller than they normally are. And so we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but it's basically a drug-like effect on the body because nutrition is so powerful. And we need to just obey the laws to say, look, because it's so powerful, what can we do that's going to sustain us the longest at optimal health, not cause these, up, down valleys and quick what we might think is results because we went extremely high protein and the scale dropped a bit because it's a diuretic, type situation.
Right. Absolutely. One or two things that today you wish you would have done 10 to 12 years ago?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. You're great podcast, great interviewer. I think that the thing that I knew but didn't teach it enough and didn't internalize it, a decade or two ago, was the importance of people to create a health identity trait immediately. In other words, we tell people, you want to create this health identity trait, this name that you have for yourself that will guide you and strengthen you during the tough times. So for me, mine is a Zane warrior. There was a bodybuilder named Frank Zane, a small guy like me that beat Arnold one year. So, that was the aesthetic. The warrior being a patriarch, a provider, a protector of the family, always being prepared. So now I can go through the day with that health identity trait and say, what would the same warrior eat at this moment? Would they get up and exercise? Would they be present for their family? Would they, be aware of what's going on? Would they feel comfortable that they could protect if needed? And it enables me to make the right decisions. And so I noticed that all the best athletes in the world, the top CEOs and doctors, all have this trait, whether they thought of it or not. And so now we work with people and say, you need to create a health identity trait. You need to come up with a name for you. Maybe it's just words, healthy and strong. Maybe it's an animal that, gives you that strength. It's a made up name. It could be whatever it is. A guy the other day created a spiritual Kobe, he said. I'm like, spiritual Kobe? He says, yeah, like a spiritual side of life, but the Kobe, fire, get things done and take no prisoner. I'm like, okay, it works for you, that type thing. So that's one health identity trait for sure, that I think it should be the most important thing in people's lives, because we all do things when it's easy,
Right.
we don't do it when it's tough, when we have a why, or we have, who are we, who's my I am. And so we encourage you to do that. The second thing I think would be the consistency of the health principles, how important that is. I'd much rather you exercise 10 minutes a day every day of your life than an hour here and there and get sore and then go back in the gym for a few days. Or your diet, I'd rather you just be consistent with your diet and be healthy versus be extremes at times. And I think the consistency, now that I'm older, I'm seeing that, man, that makes a huge difference. Muscle memory, even your body wanting to be healthy, and working to fight off disease because you're consistently working and doing things that are good for the body.
Absolutely. And that's kind of analogous to the infrared sauna. I have a portable full spectrum infrared sauna upstairs. And Dr. Sherry Rogers, before she passed, she said frequency trumps duration. So if you can do 4 to 5 days a week, 20 to 25 minutes, that trumps an hour and 10 minutes twice a week.
Yeah, that's a great way. That's a great quote. I believe 100% frequency trumps duration for sure.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. Thanks for the content that you're producing. I can tell you have your wife who doubles as a security guard. So you definitely won't get mugged or anything like that. So you should feel very safe. Where can people find you? What's the easiest website?
So our company is Optimal Health Systems. You go to optimalhealthsystems.com. People can get blood work from there. They can order the whole food supplements and all of those things. For me personally, for like the concierge coaching that me and my wife do and helping people from that standpoint, one-on-one, you can go to dougtheformulator.com. So that's kind of my nickname in the industry, is dougtheformulator.com. And that's more of the programs for people to, if they want from us. But overall, optimalhealthsystems.com, whole food supplements, blood work, everything that you need. And the key is, just look at your life as a holistic standpoint, realize the cell is a microcosm, and create that identity trait. And if myself, Dr. Jackson, anyone else, it resonates with your health identity trait, then we're there for you. We're your who, to be able to help you. And if not, you'll be led to whoever you need to be led to. And that's a great thing about it, is that the stronger your vision, the more you'll be led to where you need to be to get the help needed. And if we're one of those, then great.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Hopefully we can have you back on in the future and get some updates.
We look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.